We start with a case that's chilling. Somewhere, probably in the English Midlands, there's a killer on the loose. And someone must know who he is. The police and a grieving family need your help. As you're about to see, the nature of the killing leads to the fear that he might well strike again. It's a macabre story made even more bizarre by this letter that was sent to the police by a man who claims to be the murderer. Do you recognise the style? It may have been written with a ruler and a mapping pen, and look in particular at those peculiar S's that are written in the form of exclamation marks. It's a bit like some computer shorthand. Now, the letter could be a decoy, it could be a hoax, but if you know who wrote it, you could save someone's life. In the reconstruction that follows, every detail is as exact as we can make it. The real locations and the actual vehicle the killer drove. The outskirts of the village of Keyworth near Nottingham on Halloween last year, Monday, October the 31st. At 9 o'clock in the morning, a body was found by a passer-by. A young girl had been strangled and raped with particular brutality. Colette Aram, a trainee hairdresser, was 16 years old. The previous evening she'd set out to walk to the home of her boyfriend. She never got there. This bizarre letter was received by the police 2 weeks later. The details in it suggest it's genuine and possibly written by someone with local knowledge.
Is somebody protecting this man?
Superintendent Bob Davey heads the inquiry team. Today, 7 months and 2,000 statements later, they still haven't found the killer. And without your help, it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. A man who's white, aged roughly 25 to 35, with probably brown, wavy hair.
So what the hell do we know about him? He's not going to sit in his house with the word murderer written across his chest or across his back, is he? He's got some sort of sexual hang-up. He likes young kids. It's not going to be ever so obvious when you go through the door. But talk to the people, talk to the wives. Let's find him, because he's about somewhere. Colette's left in a field, don't forget that. We're dealing with a savage killing. Let's sniff him out and let's see if we can find him.
The police have built up a picture of the killer's movements from the letter and from corroborating evidence. It starts at a riding stables 5 miles from Keyworth.
I was in a hut for hours waiting for a girl to return from horse riding. No one saw me.
Yet the police are almost certain that the killer hid here while girls were riding near the hut. There are forensic clues, in particular a rag stained with human semen. And at about 4:30, something happened here that was to set off a fateful chain of events.
When the car came with keys, I could not help take it.
The next time the stolen red Fiesta was definitely sighted was shortly after 5 on an estate in Keyworth. The witness, a local resident, noted that the car was probably parked there for about an hour, and they were able to give a description of the driver. Did he visit a friend? Or if he actually lives locally, did he simply go home for tea? Then, early on that Sunday evening, in the hour between 6:20 and 7:20, the suspect is known to have cruised the neighbourhood, trying to pick up young girls. One of them had a very close encounter.
She's exercising the dog at the time. He stops and he makes some pretense of asking her the way to Walls Drive. Now that was clearly a bit of a ruse on his part, because Walls Drive in actual fact was only 50 yards away and he'd probably just passed it.
Yeah, look, come here. Can you tell me where Wolds Drive is, please?
You've just come out of it.
Oh yeah. Well, where are you going anyway?
Nowhere?
Do you want a lift?
No.
Oh, come on, it's warm in here, it's dry. I'll take wherever you want to go.
No thanks.
Well, what are you scared of? I'm not going to bite you. Come on. Come on, where do you want to go? I'll take you.
No.
This cruising is the kind of habit that he may well be repeating in other parts of the country. Has anyone tried to pick you up in this way?
No one knows what I look like. That is why you have not got me.
In fact, they do have various descriptions. He was seen yet again at about 8 o'clock by another important and a particularly observant witness.
Yeah. I'm just going to see some mates around there. Won't be long.
When he left the car there, he walked around the corner and then he came back and he made some comment about somebody not being in, as if it was a reference to having visited some house. Well, he couldn't have done that, because in actual fact there was no houses in that vicinity.
The witness's suspicions were already aroused when he noticed what was being carried.
Oh, yeah.
No one knows what the knife was used for, but the witness prudently took a note of the car's registration number. Colette Aram took her last walk up this hill. She left home at 8 o'clock on her way to see her boyfriend just 20 minutes away. What happened then must be speculation. But one further witness, a local resident, did provide a vital piece of information.
I know I strangled her. When a car passed, she would have got me caught. But she was not dead when I left her. Maybe the cold killed her. Cars passed when we were there. I thought she would be all right.
We're talking about Colette probably being abducted and murdered at about 8:15 on that Sunday night. At 9 o'clock that night, there's a man of the description of the man we're looking for, goes into the Generous Britain pub at Costock.
Good evening. What can I get you?
A pint of orange lemonade, please. And can I have one of those ham cobs as well?
If we accept it's the man that went in the pub, and I think we do, is a man that, if you remember, he drank a pint of orange and lemon. Now that's an unusual drink. It is in our circles. We're pints of bitter men.
Ham, he said. Ham.
Yes, please, yeah.
On holiday, are you?
No, actually, I took the wrong turning off the motorway. No, actually, I've come up to visit a friend who lives in Barton.
Oh, 91p, please.
His stories prove to be false, but they do suggest a degree of local knowledge.
He works in the power station, but he's had a bit of an accident, so I was going to visit him in hospital. Thanks.
Oh, they've gone. Excuse me.
Where's the toilet?
Oh, just back there.
We searched and we checked in the toilets and we took possession of some of the tissues. One of the tissues was sent, in fact, all of them were sent off to the forensic, and they found signs of blood and also human semen.
I go soon, and then you will never get me.
Well, the man who's determined to get him, who's in charge of the case, is Detective Superintendent Bob Davey. First of all, Superintendent, how much credence do you put in this weird letter?
Well, one's got to be open-minded about letters like this from previous experiences we've had. But there are certain aspects of this letter which make us think that it probably is genuine. That is from the man who murdered Colette.
Now, what about the description of the killer? Obviously, the man we used was an actor, and people mustn't think too much about that description. How much do we know about the killer?
Well, I shouldn't want that to mislead people, but we're looking for someone 25 to 35 years, of average height, probably light brown hair, and we know from a number of witnesses that he was wearing this brown suede or imitation suede three-quarter length coat.
Was he clean-shaven, or did he have a beard? Well, of course, he could grow a beard or cut one off since. Do we know?
Well, that's right. And in fact, a number of witnesses in this case have given varying descriptions. But we want to be open-minded about this, and we feel that at this stage he's probably clean-shaven.
And do you think that somebody out there knows or might know who the killer is, might have a good suspicion?
Well, we think so. We think that the man's got local knowledge. We think he probably lived locally at that time. And we're looking for someone who was away from his home between 4:30 that day when the car was stolen and until about 10 o'clock that night when we know the car was brought back or was seen coming back into Keyworth.
Now, this horrible behaviour that we saw, the cruising around, trying to pick up young girls, he might presumably be doing that somewhere else.
Well, this is a possibility. In fact, this is quite a likely possibility, bearing in mind his behaviour on this night. I mean, we've evidence from witnesses that, in fact, he was following young girls and cruising the area. I would think that that behaviour is probably still continuing.
So, if this happens to any other young girls, you want them to report it, wherever it is they live?
Oh, yes. If anyone's been approached in this way or seen anyone behaving in this manner, if they let us know, we'd be grateful.
Is there anything else that we should know? Have you had any other information?
Well, we've had a lot of information on the case, but there's a woman that rang in. She rang the local evening newspaper, and she rang one of our police stations. She was distressed. She was anonymous. She said that she knew who had murdered Colette, and then she broke down and she put the phone down on both occasions.
She knew who the murderer was, and she hasn't rung back?
Well, this is what she said. It may be, of course, that she doesn't know, but she thinks she knows. We'd like that woman to come forward and contact us again. We'll treat whatever she says in confidence.
Right, so you want her to ring in at anybody who thinks that they have suspicions about somebody who might have been in the area at the time, and the description is a fairly broad one.
Yes,
somebody between their mid-20s and their mid-30s.
That's right, and I certainly wouldn't want people to take too much notice of the actor or the descriptions that we've shown.
Right, Superintendent, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
The number to ring is 01 811 8055. If you think you can help in any way, and especially if you think you know who did it, please call now. Don't let what happened to Colette happen to someone else. You can talk openly or in absolute confidence, if you want, to the officers on the case. If you prefer, you can talk to a researcher from the programme. 01 811 8055. Or you can, if you want, call any time to the incident room at Bingham in Nottinghamshire. 0949 38282. Bingham 38282. Welcome. We've had a hectic evening here and we've had an overwhelming response. We've had information on all the crimes that we featured. one or two of our appeals have frankly not been too successful. Some, there's no doubt, have produced information of really very great importance. Now let's take first the murder of the 16-year-old Nottinghamshire girl, Colette Aram. We showed how the suspect had been seen in a nearby pub.
On holiday, are you?
No, actually, I took the wrong turning off the motorway. No, actually, I've come up to visit a friend who lives in Barton.
Oh, 91p, please.
His stories proved to be false, but they do suggest a degree of local knowledge.
He works in the power station, but he's had a bit of an accident, so I was going to visit him in hospital. Thanks.
And we showed you this letter. Now, it could have been a distraction, it could have been a hoax, but it claims to have been written by the murderer. Now, we've had over 100 calls of some importance on this crime. 2 or 3 in particular have produced genuinely new leads. Police inquiries have already begun on them. The detective in charge of the case is Superintendent Bob Davey. How significant are they, do you think, what you've got so far?
Well, we've had a large response, as you know. Certain calls have given us new information, but again, it's too early yet to evaluate the exact information that we've got.
Now, I know it's very frustrating in 1 or 2 cases too, because we have got information we think may be important, but as you say, it's too early to say. Of course, there's the problem of Colette's parents who may be watching too. We don't want to give them false hopes at this stage.
Yes, one's got to bear that in mind, of course, all of the time, but nevertheless, we've had some good information tonight. It's going to take us some time to evaluate it, and we've certainly got some work out of the programme.
I gather there's some work that's going on right now.
Yes, we've already initiated certain inquiries tonight, and those inquiries are being made at this moment.
OK, well, thanks very much indeed. Our phone lines are now closing down here, but if you can help in any way on Colette's killing, please call your local police, mention Crimewatch UK. Or you can ring this number, the murder incident room at Bingham Police Station. It's 0949 382 82. 0949 38282. Now, that number's been flooded ever since we came on the air, I should warn you. If you can't get through on that, here's an alternative, 0949 39192. Bingham 39192. Please, if you can help in any way, keep calling. 20 years. Oof, and we'll show you some remarkable facts about what happened in that time, as well as challenging you to help find those most wanted faces. You'll see some of the notable successes too. But first, what they call a sticker. A case that's remained unsolved for all those 20 years, and indeed was the first reconstruction we ever showed. It's a macabre story made even more bizarre by this letter that was sent to the police by a man who claims to be the murderer. Do you recognise the style? It may have been written with a ruler and a mapping pen, and look in particular at those peculiar S's that are written in the form of exclamation marks. It's a bit like some computer shorthand. Now, the letter could be a decoy, it could be a hoax, but if you know who wrote it, you could save someone's life. In fact, now police fear that in the 20 years since, the culprit must have struck again, and probably repeatedly so. 2 decades ago, Chris Barnfather was a young detective in Nottinghamshire Constabulary. This remains the most emotionally draining case he has ever dealt with. All those years, he's stuck with it. The victim was Colette Aram. 20 years on, Chris reviews the original film and reveals new evidence.
Well, Colette was abducted from the side of the road. She was probably struck at that time. She certainly had a head injury which would support that. She was dragged into a vehicle. She would have been terrified. She was driven 2 miles up the road, probably fighting in the back of the vehicle. She was dragged from the vehicle where she had her clothing removed, and she was subjected to the most appalling and violent sexual attack. She was then strangled, and she was left to die in a field a few miles from her home.
The police have built up a picture of the killer's movements from the letter and from corroborating evidence.
I was in a hut for hours waiting for a girl to return from horse riding. No one saw me.
About 5 miles from Keyworth, there are riding stables there. Young girls, predominantly, exercise their horses on a Sunday afternoon. Sometime before 4 o'clock on that particular Sunday, a man was seen loitering around an old hut which is next to the stables. I say a man, I believe that's our man. Certainly there's evidence that that man was inside the hut. We found a piece of rag which was semen stained, which indicates he was there for some sort of sexual excitement, no doubt evoked by the young girls on horseback. He saw his opportunity when the Ford Fiesta turned up, stole it and drove away in the direction of Keyworth. This whole tragic sequence of events that led to Colette's brutalised death started with the theft of that motor vehicle. This individual spent over 3 hours in the Keyworth area driving around looking for a young girl. He certainly followed other young girls that afternoon. He made approaches to other young girls. They were fortunate. Colette wasn't. She left home shortly after 8. She was certainly seen at about 8:05 by friends who acknowledged her. She was seen again at 8:10 by people who knew her. At 8:15, only 5 minutes later, a resident heard screams outside of his home. Repeated screams and shouts of no. He went to the door. He could see nobody, but he saw a vehicle driving away at speed. Nobody saw Colette Aram alive again.
Good evening. What can I get you?
A pint of orange lemonade, please.
The Generous Britain's a small village pub about 5 miles from Keyworth. It doesn't entertain many passing customers, mostly local. He engaged in conversation with the landlady. That conversation tended to indicate he had some knowledge of the area. The landlady actually noticed while serving him that on the back of his right hand he had blood, quite visible blood stains in the creases of his hand. He appeared to have noticed that she noticed and was bothered by that.
Where's the toilet?
Oh, just back there.
When Colette was found to be missing, there was an extensive search conducted throughout the village by members of her immediate family and her boyfriend's family. That continued throughout the night, obviously with police assistance. At about 9:20 the following morning, police officers were called to a field on the outskirts of Keyworth, off Thirlby Lane, where a body of a young female had been found. Unfortunately, the grandfather and the brother of Colette saw officers attending and actually followed them onto the field area. And there they were to see the horrifying sight of Colette lying naked and brutalised in that field. A fact that the police have never released before, because we always like to hold a little bit back, is the fact that Colette had had an item of clothing actually tied to her wrist. It wasn't an item that had been used in any way to restrain her or to incapacitate her. It was tied there almost as a sign to whoever found her. The way her body was posed has never been released before. She wasn't left with any dignity. She was left in a position which could only horrify anybody who stumbled across her body. The resting of her clothing had been thrown into a culvert, but an item of jewellery was missing, almost as if the offender had taken a trophy and had left his victim in a field displayed for all.
That was all 21 years ago. This is Colette's mother, Jackie Kirkby. 21 years, but presumably hasn't got any easier.
No, it hasn't. I don't think it ever does, and I think any mother would tell you the same thing. It's 21 years in October, and I remember it as if it was yesterday. You know, I go out and I see girls that Colette was at school with. They've got young children. I would probably be the same now, be a grandmother to children that Colette would possibly have had. It's very, very difficult. It's something that you never ever come to terms with. And the one person I think that really has suffered in all of this is my son. He actually saw Colette in that field, and I always remember him saying to me, "Mum, you didn't see the way she was lying there. I did." And he'll never forget that. He'll take that to his grave with him. And things like this, you never get over it. Well, it's just terrible, and I would never wish this on anyone.
And Chris, the frightening thing is, this isn't just an old case. This could be happening to other people. Perhaps not murder, but you think this man is a serial offender?
It's almost inevitable, I think, Nick, that this individual will have sexually assaulted before he killed Colette, and probably sexually assaulted since.
Now, we've got partial DNA, so if people have got any suspicions about somebody, you can easily eliminate. You've also got an EFIT, but you're very concerned that people shouldn't take this too literally, because there have been a lot of conflicting descriptions of the man.
Absolutely. Witnesses gave different descriptions at the time, and although it's maybe a backcloth for viewers to actually focus on, I'd actually ask them to try and connect maybe that image with, was this individual in the Keyworth area at the time, living there, maybe visiting there, maybe working there?
He obviously knew it, and the one thing that we do know is pretty accurate is the hair. He had sort of thick, curly black hair, was it, or dark hair anyway.
All the witnesses were very united on that issue.
He'd now be mid-40s or early 40s, perhaps around 40 years of age. We're not entirely sure. What about body height and height and that sort of thing?
Probably 5'10" muscular build.
So maybe putting on a bit of weight now. And as you say, he must have had local connections. He must have got there somewhere, somehow, if he didn't have his own car. And this fetish for stalking girls. Now, this is a behaviour he presumably exhibited at other stages and has exhibited since.
I would suspect so, yes. He clearly had followed a number of young girls around in the Keyworth area on that night before he actually found Colette.
So there'll be perhaps police officers elsewhere in the country, prison officers, psychiatric social workers, psychiatrists and so forth, people who may see somebody, and have may seen them recently, with a similar method of operation.
Yes, I believe this man may well have gone through the prison system at some point in time subsequent to Colette's killing, and I would appeal to those professionals to come forward to us tonight.
The taunting with the letter. One wonders if he might be watching Crimewatch and might ring you tonight, might ring you.
I would invite him to phone me.
You'd invite him. I should make the point, incidentally, that no calls to Crimewatch, we always say this publicly, no calls to Crimewatch are ever traced. So if he does ring, you can't trace him,
no,
but you still want him to call. We don't record them either, incidentally.
It's an opportunity to speak to him and maybe to understand why this occurred.
Jackie, having lived with us for 21 years, what would you say to anybody who, they're not sure it's somebody, but they've just got their faintest suspicion? They think, well, I can't ring on the faintest of suspicions.
I would ask them to just find it in their hearts to phone, whether they got a slight suspicion or not. Maybe then we can put behind us, well, we won't put behind us because we never will, but at least we might get to know the reasons why and get to know with satisfaction that he's behind bars and he's not going to be in a position to do this again.
Well, you can talk openly if you call us here, or if you prefer, you can talk in confidence to any of the detectives, and there are BBC staff here too, gathered here in the studio, or you can call the local incident room on 011 59 672 954. As we've been saying, he's almost certainly reoffended over the past 20 years. Please, let's catch him now.
We've been all over the news this week because the first ever appeal on Crimewatch was solved after 26 years. On Monday, former school governor and father of 4, Paul Hutchinson, was sentenced to life for the murder of teenager Colette Aram. Matthew has the inside story of how police finally caught their man.
It's my sister. My sister.
The girl found lying here in this field on that day in October 1983 was 16-year-old Colette Aram. The teenager had been abducted, sexually assaulted and then brutally killed. Colette's murder would spark a national outcry and became the first ever appeal on a new BBC crime programme, Crimewatch.
Hello and welcome to Crimewatch UK. We start with a case that's chilling. Somewhere, probably in the English Midlands, there's a killer on the loose.
On the morning of Colette's murder, a man was seen loitering at some riding stables in the Home Pierpoint area, just 5 miles from Colette's home. He went on to steal a car parked nearby. From there, he set off on a journey that would end with Colette's murder. For 3 hours, he stalked young girls around the Keyworth area, but without success.
Yeah, look, come here. Can you tell me where Wolds Drive is, please?
You've just come out of it.
That evening, Colette Aram left home to walk the short distance to her boyfriend's house. When she didn't arrive, the alarm was raised.
As a mother, I knew that there was something really, really wrong, and I just didn't want to think that she might be dead, but deep down, I just had this awful feeling.
At 9 a.m. the next morning, Colette's body was found lying in farmland close to her home. She was naked, her blouse had been tied to her wrist, and the rest of her clothes had been dumped alongside her.
The police appeared at the top of the drive, and I just saw this policeman shake his head, and I knew then that she was dead. All I remember now are the screams. My screams.
The details of Colette's murder shocked even hardened detectives. Whoever killed the teenager was extremely violent and very dangerous. The police investigation that followed was one of the biggest manhunts in the history of Nottinghamshire police.
It was a massive investigation in 1983. Over 50 detectives worked on the inquiry. Over 2,000 statements were taken, house to house, all over Keyworth. The sightings of the man fitting the suspect's description, the sightings of the vehicle, people came forward and wanted to help the police, very much so.
Within 2 days of launching the investigation, detectives had a breakthrough. A landlady from a local pub had served a man who was acting suspiciously on the night of the murder.
On holiday, are you?
No, actually, I took the wrong turning off the motorway.
She also noticed that this man had blood on his hands and disappeared to the toilet. The man fitted the description of our suspect. He got blood on his hands the same night that Colette was killed, and his story just didn't add up.
Detectives were convinced they were closing in on their man. But then, 2 weeks into the investigation, things took a disturbing turn. A letter arrived for police detailing Colette's murder and mocking detectives. It claimed to be from the killer himself.
A Ripper-style letter, almost mocking the police and leading the police away from Keyworth.
Superintendent, how much credence do you put in this weird letter?
There are certain aspects of this letter which make us think that it probably is genuine. That is from the man who murdered Colette.
Keyworth was ripped apart by this horrendous offence, and they then thought, could the offender still be amongst them?
Police managed to get fingerprints from the letter, but no match was found. And even though they had blood and semen samples from the scene, DNA technology was in its infancy and couldn't be used to identify offenders. The investigation continued for a further 2 years, but with police exhausting all major leads and the miners' strike of 1984 pulling valuable resources, the case went cold. It seemed Colette's killer had slipped through the net.
An undetected murder case is never closed. The police were determined that they would catch the killer. In 2004, the case again featured on Crimewatch.
This is Colette's mother, Jackie Kirkby.
It's 21 years in October, and I remember it as if it was yesterday.
We reinvigorated the inquiry from then, but one of the things that we looked at was the possibility of trying to develop the offender profile.
In the 21 years since the murder, there had been huge technical advances in DNA profiling. Key forensic evidence was systematically and painstakingly re-examined. And one piece of evidence all those years ago would prove vital.
One of the key exhibits was a paper towel that had been recovered from the gents' toilets at the public house. We managed to locate one specific area of that paper towel which yielded a full male DNA profile. We also found on that paper towel DNA matching Colette Aram herself.
That meant that the suspicions held in 1983 were confirmed. The man in the pub was definitively our suspect.
With a full DNA profile of the killer, police searched the national DNA database. But in a setback for detectives, no match was found. The team weren't giving up. They tried everything. House-to-house inquiries, reviewing thousands of original statements, even a new Crimewatch appeal. Then, on the 26th of March last year, a single phone call changed everything.
Mr. Flynn, we've got a match.
DNA taken from a man arrested for a minor driving offence confirmed he came from the same family as the killer. It was the breakthrough detectives had been looking for.
That led us to be interested in 4 brothers. One of those brothers had sadly died earlier in the year, but on the 7th of April, 3 of the surviving brothers were arrested. 2 gave frank accounts of their movements, and we were able to eliminate those through examination of their DNA.
That left the remaining brother, 51-year-old Paul Hutchinson.
Well, we started to build up a picture of this man. We knew that the family would live about 500 yards from where the Ford Fiesta was stolen. At the time of the murder, Hutchinson lived with his wife's parents in Keyworth, and that was about 7 streets away from where the car was repeatedly seen.
But if Hutchinson was Colette's murderer and had been living with his family in the area at the time, how had he managed to get away with it? Detectives soon proved that Hutchinson had gone to extraordinary lengths to deceive even those closest to him.
Unbelievably, this man lied to his family and friends and feigned having cancer, and even went to the extent of shaving clumps of hair, mimicking the effects of treatment of cancer. We believe that he went away, implying that he spent some time in hospital during the crucial time of this investigation.
As the investigation wound down, Hutchinson managed to blend back into the community.
He effectively became a pillar of society. He was a family man, raised 3 children with his second wife. He stayed local, worked for the local Lions charity. He was well respected within the community.
Hutchinson was even pictured at a local charity event with the then Lord Mayor of Nottingham. In a chilling twist, the mayor happened to be Colette's uncle.
Yes?
The truth behind this man was that he was an inveterate liar. He had a previous marriage which was violent. He'd lied in that. He even inferred that he got a psychology degree, which was a complete and utter lie. An extremely deceitful, violent individual.
Paul Hutchinson?
Yes?
I'm arresting you for the murder of Colette Aram in Keyworth in 1983.
In keeping with a man who'd kept Colette's murder a secret for over a quarter of a century, Hutchinson was utterly cold during his police interviews, refusing to accept his guilt. Faced with irrefutable DNA evidence, he even went as far as trying to blame his dead brother. But little did he know, the letter he'd sent police, arrogantly taunting them back in 1983, would finally seal his fate.
When we compared Hutchinson's fingerprints to those that were unidentified on that letter, there was a positive match. Ironically, his fingerprint was found above the words, "Got me caught."
Then, out of the blue, before his trial, Hutchinson changed his plea to guilty. But to this day, he remains totally silent about Colette's murder.
He's been given an opportunity to tell us and to tell the family why he committed such an horrendous crime, and he's not taken that chance to give some solace to the family.
I'd like to know why he felt the need to do what he did. You know, this innocent 16-year-old girl, did she really deserve to die the way she died?
As Colette's mum says, they know the who but not the why.
Yeah, it's the burning question for the family. Do you know, they interviewed him for 2 days, and for 2 days he just said no comment, no explanation, no apology, no nothing.
I think it's pretty surprising that he lived locally for all those years.
Yeah, it's staggering. For 26 years, he never lived further than 10 miles from the murder scene. He worked as an electrician, he set up that newspaper company, charity work, a school governor, all local. And I suppose it was that arrogance that we saw with that Ripper-style letter, where he genuinely thought he would never be caught. And it was a mixture of arrogance and deception. All of those lies about having cancer to cover his tracks, and then more lies to build a new life.
Matthew, what about other crimes?
Well, it was the first thing that detectives looked at. They put his DNA into the national database. They also looked at other unsolved crimes. So far, nothing, but they are still investigating that.
In the end, it was all down to dogged police work, really.
Yeah, I mean, they never gave up, and nor did Crimewatch. There were 3 major appeals, and each one generated hundreds of calls. And Kevin Flint, who headed this investigation from 2004 and got the Queen's Medal, he was saying, as detectives, you can never bring back loved ones. The most you can do is try your damnedest to get a successful prosecution, and that's what they did. Life with a minimum of 25 years.
They did it. Good news.